Oh Lord, here we go again. I just dropped 2 tabs and I lost my friends. Oh Lord, here we go again. I just dropped 2 tabs and I lost my friends. I'm like, oh Lord, here we go again.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Rip City Real Talk, and with you after everything that's going on this week is Craig Moshkow and Anthony Blaylock. How you doing, pal?
Hey, bud. Yeah, man. It's weird. It's just a full-on week. No Blazers. Like, what? It's the reality starting to hit. And I mean, watching Denver get swept by Phoenix makes the reality a little bit harder. Like, come on, you couldn't give them a little bit of a fight. But whatever. So that's where my feelings are at these days. Other than that, feeling good, man. How are you?
Good. So, yep, like you said, we just watched Denver get swept out of the playoffs. The Blazers coaching stuff heated up this week. And I think for you and I, it's all about talking about what we're going to do in the offseason a little bit. It's a little premature still, so we're going to cover what we think the team is going to look like. We're not going to go too in-depth on the draft, the free agents, or anything like that until we just cover what we feel like the team is going to do with our contract. So in looking at that, you were looking at it today and you just said that even though all these players fall off of our roster this year and become free agents and we don't have their rights, we still go up in salary next year. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so we're gonna lose, I believe it's potentially 7 players, maybe 8. So yeah, you figure we're gonna lose probably Powell, Jones. We're gonna lose Leaf, Blevins, potentially Collins, Cantor, Mello. I mean, there's a big list here.
Yeah.
And so that's 7 to 8 guys that are going to come off our roster. And then the actual salary next year. Now, granted, the salary next year, I'm including Powell in that, to be fair. And I'm including Derek Jones Jr. in that because they technically have players options. So that'll clear up cash in that situation. But that all being said, if they do come back, even without him, I mean, we're going to be about $1.3 million over where we are this year. So we're losing all these guys and going up in salary. Now, obviously, with Powell, I mean, he has about $11 million, just over that. And then Derek Jones is about $10 million that could fall off the books, which gives you back 20 mil. But still, I mean, it's a little interesting, to say the least, when it comes to roster construction. And that is the name of the day. That's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the roster, pretty much who's locked in, who we think should come back, want to come back. All that fun stuff. It's going to be an interesting podcast as we debate back and forth between players that we would like to see return and how that can happen and what we think other players should be done with.
Yeah, and the reason that our salary balloons so much next year is Dame's super kicks in at 43 mil. CJ makes almost 31 mil, which is fine. And then obviously Nurkic and Covington are about 12 and 13 respectively. The other thing that's worth mentioning, we don't know a lot about the salary cap next year. It's not all figured out. But the other thing is we did reset the luxury repeater tax this year. So we actually dropped out of the luxury tax. So we reset our repeater. So we could go back into the luxury next year and not be as penalized if Jody Allen wants to pay up that money. That's the only little sign of hope that we have at this point.
That's not the only sign of hope and good news, my friend. No, the Anderson Varejão's contract officially poof, he's gone. All the money that we just saved,
$2 million. Hey, it's $2 million. That's a contract.
At this point, I mean, that's about as good as it's gonna get. We still have, I think, Andrew Nicholson or whatever his name is for another 4 years. I swear to God, that guy's been a Blazer longer than any of our other current players.
And it's
I feel like he's been there longer than Dame.
Yeah, his goes through 2022, 23. So he's on there for 2 more years after this.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's but Anderson Varejão finally drops off. So all these dead weight contracts that we've picked up in some trades to try to make deals is finally, I guess you could say that's a positive outlook. It's not going to go much as far as the way of getting us a lot of salary back, but it still makes a difference. I mean, it's good to have at this point, even 2 mil is enough to draw some vets in, hopefully.
So let's just go from the bottom of the roster up. So the people we have under contract next year, we have CJ Ellaby in a $1.5 million part of his rookie deal. Nasir Little's under contract for $2.3 million, and then Anthony Simons for $3.9. Let's just go through those 3 guys. I mean, obviously we're comfortable with them. They're young guys. Do you think any of them are going to play significant minutes next year?
Yeah, I mean, sure, why not? I think They have to, right? It's tough to dive into the roster right now without really talking about the CJ thing, because the CJ thing, it makes such a big deal when it comes to the construction of this roster. I mean, it's huge because it's $30 million. If you keep him, that you're now having to pay. And that's fine and dandy. It really is, but you got to think that you're not going to have a lot of money to go out and get anybody except vets that might be willing to come in on lower contracts to try to just compete with Dame if he has that kind of draw.
Mm-hmm.
If you choose Dame over Miami and Los Angeles and New York and all these other places where these guys could potentially go and be in bigger markets, whatever. So let's assume for now, I'm going to play all the assumption games that CJ is going to stay. We want him to be traded. We'll talk about that a little more, but let's, for now, for the sake of this, we're slowly going off the contracts next year. So yes, CJ's here. He's getting his 30 mil. That means that a guy like Anthony Simons at $4 million as a backup combo guard is even more important probably than ever, unless you can go scrape a backup point guard, some kind of a vet off of the heap of vets that might be out there. The free agent market's pretty weak, but it's probably strongest at point guard. I mean, guys like Lowry are going to hit. I mean, Paul's probably not going anywhere, but Lowry's going to be available. There's some other names at the point guard position. Yeah, I mean, he's, again, probably going to stay with the Jazz. Maybe not. It's hard to say. But regardless, the chances are some of these vets might get slightly better contracts on the market than they might normally get because teams are probably going to give them the $4 or $5 million to try to come in and play back up to some of their stars, some of these younger guards. So Simons has to play big minutes. I mean, he has to be an improvement. Maybe we use him differently. Really, it's defensively is where he needs to improve the most. His playmaking got way better this year. His decision-making got way better. He obviously shot really well from three. He took a lot of attempts from three, and that's going to probably still be his game. I wish he drove more. I really do. I wish he was more aggressive. It's just not there in his game. He probably doesn't get enough time on the court to really break down the defense and figure out how he wants to attack. If he did a little bit more of that, I think he'd be, I don't want to use the word elite, but I will say one of the upper echelon backup scoring guards. You know,
he'd be good.
Think about what Monty Morris did to us. I think he could do what Monty Morris did to us. I don't see why he couldn't to another team. So at $4 million, yeah, he's definitely going to be one of the highest paid backups we have right now. I mean, it's weird to say, but it's true. And I think he'll get big minutes. I want to get big minutes. I do not understand why he wouldn't get big minutes. He showed a much improved jump shot. Mm-hmm. He still has the athleticism to finish around the rim. He can make guys look silly. I think his offensive game is going to take a big leap if he gets relatively normal minutes on the bench roll, that 15 to 20 minutes. Sure. On whether it be backup power forward or just backup small forward if you're going to go on traditional. And I still think his defense is a little shoddy.
Yeah,
it looks raw. He looked lost. That, again, just comes with playing time experience. He has the athleticism to play decent defense. I think he's better off suited to play against a 4 in the Robert Covington type role. I think he's better defending slower guys instead of guys that can get around him because he's just not that quick as far as his defensive footwork. So both those guys, I think, are going to get big minutes. As far as Elodie goes, I mean, he's just going to be here until we get rid of him. He's not. He's a roster depth move. Yeah, exactly. He's not, unless injuries really take their toll and whatnot. I think he could be a summer league MVP. I'm all for it. Like, I hope the summer league comes back this year. Haven't heard any word on it. Probably won't, but I'm all for it. Let him go lead the Blazers to another championship in the old summer league. But yeah. he's not going to get any minutes.
Okay, so I agree with you for sure on Little. I think a new coach could actually develop him and use him a lot more. We need good young defensive wings, and Nasir Little has shown big leaps and bounds. The same thing with Anthony. He's going to be a complete necessity. As much as he frustrates me because it's all confidence with Ant, and it's whether he gets hot or not. But he's going to be a necessity for this team. I want to move into another small section here because I'm going to lump these two guys together. And the reason I'm going to lump them together is, number one, they almost make the exact same amount of money. And number two, they're almost as essential to this team as you can possibly get without being a superstar. And those two guys are Nurkic and Robert Covington. They're both in the last year of their deal next year. They're 12 and 13 million. And as much as I would love to shake it up, I honestly think we should just keep both of them.
Well, you got to keep Covington. I mean, that's a gimme. He's making 13 mil
He's
for
12.
At this point a 3-and-D wing that if everything goes the way we want it to go, he'll move to small forward this year. Hopefully we get a big that can play power forward. But regardless, he's very transitional. He can play both power forward, small forward. I think his three-point shooting will get better. It's tough to get a rhythm going when you're playing with Dame and CJ. Quite frankly, it's just they're going to get a lot of shots. They're going to shoot a lot of threes. It's going to be hard for you to realistically get a lot of looks. Now, he had some chances. He shot pretty good. Could have been better, in my opinion. Could have hit some more open looks. But realistically, you get a guy like him at $13 million. You keep him. Not only that, but he becomes a big trade asset. If things don't go the way you want, he's a guy that you could trade to a contending team and ideally get something back with an expiring contract at 12 mil. That's reasonable. 13 mil. You could get something back for him if you decide not to move CJ, for instance. He may be a guy that draws something back for you, depending on where you are in the season. But yeah, to me, he's got to stay. He's just too valuable at that contract to not bring back.
What about your boy Nurk?
Ooh, my boy Nurk. Now that's where things get interesting. So it gets interesting because I at first I loved his contract. I mean, it was 11 to 12 mil, like for an up and coming big that can pass and dominate down low and respectable defender. Yeah, I mean, I was all for it. But now with the injuries, he hasn't really been able to get in a big rhythm. The foul trouble was there. I mean, he's brought in to try to slow guys like Jokic down. And he fouled a lot. He just didn't look like he could handle some of these bigs. I mean, you worry about what Anthony Davis has done to him in the past. Guys like Embiid are going to continue to do to him, which it's tough to get a center like that regardless. I mean, you're not going to have a lot of guys that can go out there and defend those guys unless you get one of those guys defending each other, right? I mean, it is what it is. But the big thing with Nurk is obviously the non-guaranteed 12 mil. That's the big thing with Nurk. So I don't think there's any way that this team waives him. I just don't think you can do that, but it's a possibility with the contract situation being the way it is, with our salaries being the way they are. Nurk becomes an interesting piece. He's expiring, so you would think you would try to trade him before you potentially think about waiving him, but come free agent time, come roster construction time, if you fail to move CJ, I mean, what are your thoughts on potentially just letting Nurk walk? This is a weird question, and I think it's a very small percentage of people that would be okay with it. But I am curious. I think opening up 12 million for a guy like him.
I would like to see this team, depending on what happens with the CJ trade. If the CJ trade brings in a big who's a switchable tweener, like they can play 5 or 4, I would prefer us to move on from Nurk at some point. But if you don't bring in a big, you don't get a Montrezl Harrell or a John Collins or someone of that archetype, then I would want to keep Nurkic. The thing about the next coach is it will depend on what their defensive style is for Nurk, because Nurk is a drop center and we may not need that as much. Now, Gobert's a drop center and they run a fantastic defense. Ayton is too. But you may want to play small more, or the next coach may not want to be committed to that scheme. So I guess for me, it comes down to the next coach. And do we need Nurk? Is it a necessity? Because unless we're getting another replacement or someone of equal value to put him in there, this team cannot get worse defensively in the front court. Like, you just cannot make – it's already so brittle in the backcourt that we're going to be bottom of the league. And if you move Nurk, it gets even worse. So it just depends, man. I don't know, but I do know that there's nobody better than Nurk for the 13 million that we have him on right now. No. We need to ride that contract out and see what happens.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, it depends on what's available free agent wise and looking at the free agent class, and we'll dive into some later pods, but it's not good. It's not great. There's nobody that you can really say like, oh man, we can drop Nurk and go get this guy and he'll be the same thing or just slightly worse, but it'll be fine. I mean, there's guys like Nerlens Noel that I would love to get on this team as really a backup center, but those are kind of the guys you're looking at that you can't necessarily start.
They don't give you enough offensively at all. Like, none of these centers can give you what Nurk can offensively, moving the ball too.
Right, and that's the other side of it, right? It's the ball movement. It's when Nurk is healthy and he's on the court with him and Dame, the way he can pass and make certain plays and draw other bigs out towards him. really does open up a lot on the offense, and that's the one thing. If he just played okay defense, which he does, he plays good defense, and if he just rebounded and had a good post game, I'd be like, yeah, you can find centers that can do that for much cheaper to try to support role Dame and CJ. Nurk to me feels like he needs to be the second option on an offense to really be his true self. But that all being said, I think you nailed it right there with the passing game. That's the element that I don't think you can get back, and it's really hard to find from a big guy. I mean, Covington's not going to be able to, he's not a passer. He's not passing the ball out there. And you're not going to see a lot of guys available that are going to be able to do that. The Draymond Greens, the Jokic's, these guys that can come in here and get, 4 or 5 assists for a big man consistently, I should say, is tough. And that is where Nurk's value is to me. Now, I do think he's one of the top guys that you're going to obviously look to trade. I would rather trade him over Rocco, personally. If he gets to be the midpoint of the season and Nurk is not making a huge impact either way, we look like the same team, and he's getting into foul trouble, and let's say he stays healthy. You look to move him because there's a lot of teams that don't have a lot of bigs, or could use a big. There's so many teams out there that can give you assets back for a guy like Nurk. So it's interesting. I mean, I didn't think you would say, hey, let's just waive him. I think that would be ludicrous. I don't think there's a Blazers fan out there that's like, oh, you just waive Nurk. He's the best defensive big. I get it. It's the money, and that's what it comes down to. It's who's available for you to go after, and the money that you have available. That's where the situation gets tricky and odd, because I mean, so let's do this. I'm gonna hit you with this, because this is kind of an interesting piece of this. So Nurk's 12 mils non-guaranteed, right? Well, Powell has a player option, right? So he very well and probably will potentially opt out. Now you're gonna have the first crack at the egg, right? You're gonna have the first chance to make the omelet with him, but if you don't make some moves and get some money out of here, Powell's probably gonna to walk, and we'll touch a little bit more on that in just a moment. But would you rather, for this team, have Powell back or Nurk? And that goes out to, I mean, any fan out there. At this point, would you rather bring back Nurk or Powell? Because if you open up Nurk's 12 mil, even if you take 6 to 7 of that and give it to Powell, you probably can keep him here for 18, 19 mil.
That's a really good question. I don't think I'd let Nurk go. I think that Powell's shooting and defense is nice, but we'd feel undersized. And if you lose Nurk, what are you going to do? Sign Zach Collins? Like, I'm not comfortable with the level of replacement drop off. To me would be frightening, because I love Powell and I love what he can do, putting pressure on the rim and scoring 20 points. And he's a very good defender. But we'll always be undersized in that lineup. And then you lose Nurk, and now we're really undersized because we're probably playing a smaller guy. So I would say Nurk, but I'm really uncomfortable with that.
I think it really depends on the bigs that are on the market, because I don't need an elite big man with this team. I mean, we're a 3-point shooting team. We're going to continue to be an ISO 3-point shooting team. But Dame and CJ are your 2 guards, which, again, is the assumption that we are making with this breakdown. Then it's going to be tough for a guy like Nurk to get involved offensively. He'll be opportunistic, and they'll run some pick and roll and try to get the ball to him and all that good stuff. But realistically, we're going to be shooting a lot of threes. But I agree. I think the point of attack defense is still going to be terrible with Dame and CJ. I don't care what schemes you run. They can't slow anybody down. It's going to be a headache for any coach to try to deal with, because guys are going to have to help all the time, and not having a center down there that can at least do some rim protection is going to be rough. You probably need it. Now, I also think that you can find those guys out there. Again, I keep bringing up guys like Nerlens Noel. Like, I think that you could sign him at 4 or 5 mil and start him. You don't need him to be an offensive juggernaut, but he can go down there and block shots and use his length and athleticism to, be a threat. He did great. Where was he? New York this year? He did great. So I think those guys are out there, but I agree with you. I think Powell versus Nurk, I'm in that same boat. I think you keep Nurk. Powell, you got to let go. Now, if you trade CJ, Powell's a must sign. There's just not a lot of good shooting guards out there free agent wise, unless you're trading CJ for a guard, which
wouldn't make any sense.
I don't see why a team would do that. Then you're kind of needing to re-sign Powell. But just an interesting piece there, because that's the kind of questions that you have to ask yourself when you talk about the Nurk contract.
And that's a good point that you just brought up too. So let's say, for example, I mean, you would need to lock Powell up before you trade CJ, but Neil would need assurances from the team that he's trading CJ to that they won't
Yeah.
leak it. And then like that's a really complicated domino situation that you're gonna have to navigate. I know that all the Blazers fans are like just trade CJ and sign Powell, and it's that easy. It's like it's not that easy. Powell's gonna want to test the market to see how much money he can get. And yes, we have his rights and all that stuff, but you just never know. And if he's worried about his playing time here because he feels like CJ is going to man the shooting guard spot and he's locked into the small forward. I think that fans are overly complicating a very complex situation with the Powell CJ thing this year.
You mean undercomplicating?
Or undercomplicating it. Yeah.
No, I got you, and that's a big piece of it because here's the deal with Powell, and this is the shooting guard market right now. / I guess you could call small forward market. I mean, if you want to go really small with Powell, like what we did and what I guess Toronto did, the guys that are out there, it's brutal. It's brutal. I mean, obviously Kawhi Leonard is the cream of the crop if he decides to leave LA, but he's not going to go to a lot of teams. He's going to be extremely picky. If he goes somewhere, it's going to be a team like Miami to team up with Butler. He'll probably just stay put in LA. Yeah. So let's say he's off of the board. Then your shooting guards, you have some of these guys pulled up. Your shooting guards. I do.
So let me kick you some names. So Oladipo is technically a shooting guard. DeMar DeRozan is technically a shooting guard. And then you got like Kelly Oubre. It's
Evan Fournier.
Josh Hart.
Gary Trent.
Gary Trent, because they have his rights, and you've got to think that they re-signed him, right? Because he's a restricted.
They traded for him. They'll probably.
It's a very light two, because for guys that are two ways that can play on both sides of the floor and are 28 years old, like Norm is, where it's like he's still going to be good in his prime.
Championship experience.
Yeah, it's Danny Green is in his 30s. It's like, do you really want to sign Danny Green to a 3-year contract? No, you want to sign him to a 1-year deal. But with a guy like Oladipo, he's got injury problems. Do you really want to sign him? There's lots of inherent risk. DeMar DeRozan is aging. So Norm is one of the few premier two-way shooting guard small forward combos. And I don't know that he's a small forward. We use him that way. I'm just gonna call him a shooting guard.
I mean, Toronto used him that way, but I agree. He's more of a shooting guard. He's 6'3", for goodness sakes. Like, he's better suited to be a shooting guard and play with some wings. Now, yeah, so that's the thing, right? Like, the market is primed this year in particular for him to go out and get 18, 19, 20 mil. Easy. At least, right? So, and that's going to be a 3-year deal. He'll probably do a 2 with a player option or something like a lot of guys are doing now. But that's the thing. Like, he's going to have his options. So the chances of him, he's not going to re-up. He's not going to take his 11, 12 mil to come back to Portland. It's not going to happen because he wants to test that market. So then it becomes whether or not we can give him a good enough pitch as the team that he's played with. Hey, we got Dame still. We got rid of Stotts. Maybe this helps. Whatever the case is, maybe you can woo him. You go out and get a Mike D'Antoni. And it's like, we're going to shoot so many threes. We're going to push the pace so much. You're going to be such a big part of the offense. And maybe you bring him back. No, you got to have the money to do it. And unless you move CJ again, you're not going to have the money. So he's probably out. You kind of have to make a choice then between, again, him and CJ. And there's no word that you're getting rid of CJ. Now, CJ is probably a better overall scorer. He can do a little bit of everything. The mid-range game, he can still shoot. But Powell, I like Powell more. I think he drives better. He draws more fouls. He can still shoot probably just as good as CJ easily. Not quite as smooth of a mid-range game, but I don't know. It's tough.
So here's the one thing that I would bring up too is like one of the problems with the Dame and CJ era has been getting out in transition. We've never been a very good transition team. If we were to be able to use Powell more, he's really good in transition. The other person who's really good in transition would be a Derrick Jones Jr. He has also a $9.7 million option. Okay, here's my question for you really simply with Derrick Jones. Does he want to take his 9.7 or does he want to test the market? Because why would he take it? He didn't have a role last year and Portland kind of toasted him, kind of burned him a little bit. So Derrick Jones, give me the breakdown.
I don't want him back. I'm done with Jones. He disappointed me all year. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what you want to argue that Stotts didn't use him. You want to argue this. You want to argue that. You want to argue how the dude was out there and he didn't look good. He consistently got beat by small guards. Great. He got banged up all the time because he's kind of thin. I'm sorry. He's athletic, but he's thin. And so he gets banged around. I mean, how many times did we see him limping around out there? He did not go for offensive rebounds as much as I would have liked. I mean, imagine if he played like Ronde Hollis Jefferson, was just always around the ball. The difference is when Ronde got an offensive rebound, the dude couldn't jump where he couldn't. I can't say bad words, but he couldn't jump. He couldn't get that ball back up there. Jones would just jump over somebody and dunk it. I mean, yeah, he can say, "Oh, Stotts just put him in a corner, just wanted him to shoot the three." Well, okay. So Ronde Hollis was probably the same type of thing, and he still somehow found a way with his energy to be around the ball 24/7. Jones looked lost on the perimeter. He was always sucked in. I mean, that's partially because Dame and CJ can't defend.
Yeah.
But he keeps getting dragged into the middle, and he was consistently getting beat by open threes. He was not out there. For a guy with his length, it should be very hard to shoot over him, and he started the season, and we were still historically bad on defense. Blame Stotts all you want. This guy is a defensive player. He should be making adjustments. Rocco had no problem adjusting and playing the help defender role. With Jones's length, he should have done more. Offensively, yeah, I mean, I'm sure we could use him to cut more, but that's not going to be how the offense is going to be ran. You have two ISO ball handlers. They're not going to be pushing the pace that much. Even with Dan and Tony, it's just not going to happen. Like, it's going to be opportunistic. Sure, you're going to have a chance to push more, and if you use them, just go towards the rim, run, and then we'll throw the ball to you. I mean, you're going to have opportunities, but it's not like you're going to run your whole offense through him. So I'm done with him. I want to take your $9 million and give it back to me and go play somewhere else. As far as him opting in, that's where it gets interesting, because normally I would say, no, a guy's going to want to test the market. Look at his role last year. We benched him, for goodness sakes. But Stotts is gone. So there's a mind change right there. Maybe he thinks if a new coach comes and says, hey, we're gonna use you in a much bigger role. We don't know what happened last year. We plan on having you come out and be more involved. But B, the fact that Stotts didn't use him doesn't give him the best showcasing. He wasn't used in the finals very much. I mean, people can say he got hurt. Maybe he did. But either way, he didn't get a chance to show off in the playoffs with the Heat. With us, he lost his starting role. He lost a bench role. He basically was non-existent. He was banged up throughout the year. So if you're another team out there right now, like, are you looking to give him $9+ million? Like, if you're Derrick Jones, you just say, screw it, I'll take one more year, get my money, and then I'll test the market if I get a bigger role.
It might be worth it, because if you think about it, we signed him really late in free agency last year. I mean, he signed way late into, and we just happened to have the money to afford him, and we needed a wing. But if you think about it, you're right. He didn't get showcased a lot this year. His stats are terrible if you look at them on average. So I don't see where another team would come in and swoop him up. I get he's
not
still
for that
young.
money.
No, not for $10+ million. So he might as well. I don't know. I could see him taking the $9 million if he feels like the coaching change is going to make a difference in his role.
Yeah, I think a lot. Same with Rodney Hood. I mean, I know Rodney Hood really liked Portland, and I get all that, but I also think Rodney Hood didn't think he was going to make that kind of money, and he opted in and came back for the money we offered him because of the same exact situation. So, to me, if I'm Jones, I'm taking the money. I don't think you can get $10 million unless you really come out and show that you're an Andre Iguodala, you're the next like big wing defender with the wingspan, and you can do all these things. Money's going to be tight for a lot of teams unless you're going to go to a team that's not really a contender. Fine, you go get some money somewhere. Maybe an Orlando throws some money at you, but chances are you might end up under Stotts again. So, like, I don't know. If I'm him, I'm leaning towards Jones taking the money and coming back. That's just my thought process. I know he couldn't have been thrilled playing here. And I think even Neil's press conference was interesting, because in his press conference, he said, hey, we brought Derrick Jones in to be a defensive guy. That didn't work. After all the stats bashing that I feel like he did, you and me both can agree, he basically threw Stotts under the bus. He did not stick up for Jones. And that was a guy that he brought in. And he said that did not work out. He didn't say, hey, we didn't use him right. He wasn't as involved as I would have liked him to be, blah, blah, blah. That was he didn't work out, so we traded for Powell. To me, that's Neil coming out word-wise and saying, Jones isn't my guy. I don't want him here. Now, he could opt in and take the money. There's nothing that Neil can do except try to trade him, but that tells me that he's not going to make a big effort to convince him to come back. Maybe I'm reading that wrong, but as somebody that typically reads those words pretty well, that is just an interesting quote from Neil that kind of went under the rug with all the other things he said.
Yeah.
So I think Jones comes back. I think he takes the money. I know people are going to think that he's probably unhappy, but I think he comes back. And if that's the case, he basically immediately slides back into your small forward role. So,
yep.
because you don't have any options.
That would also harken back to the Powell CJ debacle, because if CJ's on this roster and Derrick Jones comes back and you can't sign Powell because you don't have the money for him, then yeah, you'd have to play Jones at 3 a lot and Covington will play 4. And then at that point, your money's pretty locked in. I mean, you can work around the edges, but it's going to be kind of tough to find a starting 3 with how little money we would have. So I agree with you. I mean, I do think a coaching change could be big for Derrick. I think that he took his role seriously with the Blazers. I do think that we needed more on-ball defense throughout the year. I mean, we survived with Powell. The thing about Derrick was he just shot so poorly from 3. And every time he was out there, he was literally a one-way player. He was literally only good on the defensive end of the floor. And as much as people are like, you got to use him as a cutter, Dame and CJ don't throw lobs. They've never thrown lobs. We've watched them play with tons of athletic people. They've never thrown effective lobs. It's just not a part of the offense. Now, they can say that the next coach can integrate that and put that in. That's great if they can. I don't think that they can. I think Dame and CJ are just not good lob passers, but I'd be happy to be proven wrong by a Derrick Jones re-signing and then he just goes crazy next year for 12 points a game.
But that's the other thing. I mean, so your offense is going to revolve around Dame and CJ. Dame basically choosing to attack or to shoot every time. When he plays off ball and CJ gets it, CJ is going to look the dribble around for 20 seconds and then try to get him a shot. And that's fine and dandy. Yeah. I mean, he's a great mid-range shooter. Yeah. But then after that, you go to Nurk. All right, you go to Nurk. Nurk gets involved, whether it be on a pick and roll or it be on he gets the ball up top and throws it to somebody, or, or they try to feed him down low and give him a mismatch, or whatever the case is. But Nurk is your third option. So the problem with Jones and wanting to use him as a cutter and do all these things, I mean, where are you going to get the opportunities to do that? Like, you're going to design a play for it's like, all right, it's time for Jones just to run up the middle. We're going to try to throw him the ball. The reason he was successful in the dunks that he had last year was because teams were so focused on Dame and CJ out trying to shoot threes that they kind of sunk away from him, and he was able to, when he decided to, take advantage of it. I think he's a great finisher around the rim. I wouldn't mind seeing him do that more, but he's your 4th, 5th option at best when he's out there with the starters. That's not a guy that you draw up cuts for. Like, you're not going to waste an offensive possession trying to draw a cut to Jones. Yeah. He's an opportunistic scorer, and he will always be an opportunistic scorer. He's a guy that if you're running a fast break and you happen to see him, try to feed him the ball if you can. And that's great, but that's no different than anybody else that you could put in that role. I think his athleticism is great and all, but I just don't see him. I don't see. I mean, he's not going to be part of the offense. He's not going to be a guy that's going to.
Yep. And I was going to say, and that's the thing that we argued all year, is that it's the guards and the style of play that we play. And then other people would argue with us and say, no, it's the coaching. So we're going to see this year. We're going to figure it out. And
it's hard to say, right? Because Dame and CJ have never had anybody but Stott. So we don't know. To me, I disagree. I think the players are players. I don't think Chris Paul changes when he goes to a new team. He's still Chris Paul. Harden doesn't change when he gets a new coach. He's still Harden. Dame and CJ are what Dame and CJ are. At this point, they're vets. They're not some young guy that you can groom to play a certain way and say, hey, let's try to take advantage of this particular strength. No, Dame and CJ at this point are 30 years old. They are the way they are. They're going to continue to play regardless. The coach is going to come in and figure out how to use that and work with that. He's not going to come in and be like, Dame, I need you to start throwing lobs, or CJ, your job now is to attack the rim all the time. Stop it. Stop it.
Yep. And those two guys are under contract next year. Dame's supermax $43 million. CJ makes 31. That's the last 2 contracts that we have. Now, Zach Collins does have a $7 million qualifying offer, and we could also try to re-sign him for cheap on like a 2-year deal. I'm not going to comment on that. We talked about it last offseason or this preseason about how we were done with ZC. We're not big fans, and we don't think we need him. Let's just go sign somebody else.
I'm not going to say that, bud. Like, slow down here. All right. You're just putting words in my mouth. I, my friend, am a big fan of bringing back Zach Collins.
You couldn't get out of the straight face.
No, I'm sorry, man. Like, listen. I told you this before. You're not going to give him the qualifying offer of $7.4 million. No. He's an unrestricted free agent. The thing is, there ain't very many teams out there that are going to throw money at him. Now, he's young. He's showed some promise and flashes. He's also been banged up forever. So, to me, and I think I used this analogy before, so whatever. I'm using it again. Again, he's like the DVD section at Walmart, right? The $3 DVD section where you have the off-brand Homeward Bounds, and you're just like, screw it. My kid wants a present. I'm gonna get my kid the B-level Homeward Bound with the yellow lab instead of a golden retriever. Like, whatever. So to me, Zach Collins is the kind of guy that you're needing to find when you have this much money invested in Rocco, Nurk, CJ, and Dame, and potentially Derrick Jones. You don't have a lot of money to fill out the bench, and that's the one thing that we really haven't talked about. We touched on it early with guys like Amp and Little, who are probably going to play big roles because of their money. Zach's the same type of way. Now, I get it. You can probably go out and find a center. It's a similar price, maybe, that can do what Zach can do. But to me, if you give him $2 million, 2.5, $3 million max to come in and be a guy that, if he comes back from injury, can still shoot okay and can still give you defense. Bench guy, not starting anymore. You're not going to put him out there 30 minutes, 25 minutes, but for 15 to 20, go foul a bunch. Go just piss off the backup bigs of another team. You know how valuable he would have been in that Denver series?
Yeah.
Just out rebound instead of Cantor. Just able to play defense on Millsap and block shots and then go down the other end and actually give you something.
Yeah.
And now it all depends on how he comes back from the injury, granted. But to me, he was very involved with the team, very energetic on the bench. So that tells me he didn't give up on the team. I just think that he's still a guy that you can bring back cheap and give a year, see how he comes out. And worst case, you trade him.
Just knowing Neil's history of re-signing his guys to a second contract, even if they just show flashes, right? Even if they don't play big minutes, but they show flashes. If it's the right deal, like you said, $2.5 to $4 million per year for 2 and an option, or 1 and 1, 1 and an option. I don't know, but I could see Neil offering Zach something, and if it's not better than what Zach sees from other teams, I do think he'd come back to Portland. I think he loves the Pacific Northwest. I think he likes the Blazers. He's stuck with the team even through the whole year. So yeah, but I want that? I don't think so. I mean, I don't see any ways. He's not a ceiling raiser. He's not going to help us win anything, and he's probably going to get
he's a backup big that you can throw out there for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know what else is out there. Like, I mean, again, I throw out guys like Nerlens Noel. I'd love. There's Gorgie Jang. So, I mean, there's guys that I feel like you could try to go sneak on this roster for a backup big, but what we cannot do is another Cantor. You can't get a big who can't defend. And that's the thing. Like, I don't know how bad Collins is defensively. I mean, we've only seen flashes. He looked fine when he was out there, but he was also starting, got in foul trouble. You know, he was energetic, but he wasn't great at control. I don't care if you're the backup big. Like that, who cares? If you're the backup big, go for it. I mean, look at the minutes that he played when we went to the Western Conference Finals, backing up Cantor. I mean, he played a pretty good role. So I just feel like if he can go get like he's an Ed Davis-esque guy, like I am all for a guy that can come back if he can recover well and he gets a good training camp and offseason in and you throw a couple mil at him. I'm willing to bring him back. But that's the kind of, when we start getting into our free agent discussions, those are the kind of guys that we're going to have to take a huge look at. And if you get a guy to give us a home court advantage or discount, or whatever the term is, a home court discount here, and he knows, I won't say he knows the system, but he knows the players. He knows how to roll with CJ and Dame. He knows how to play well with Nurk. If they, get into foul trouble, you're going to know how to handle playing with some of the guys, at least being around the team, the area and everything. That's a big jump over some other guys that may not come in and fit as well. I don't know. I'm all about bringing him back, but I agree. You're not doing the 7.4. You can't afford to do the qualifying offer. So he's going to have to be a unrestricted free agent, and he's going to have to be really cheap.
Yeah, and the other thing with this next coach, I think they're going to have to do something Stotts never wanted to do, and that's use younger guys in legitimate backup roles. I mean, I think that they're going to have to plug in a guy like Nasir Little and just say, I got to develop this guy with the constraints that you're going to have from Dame Super and CJ's Max, unless you find some type of relief somewhere. And I don't know where that would come from. Obviously, we'll talk about the CJ trade next week, but at this point, you're not going to have 7 or 8 really good guys to go to. You're going to have to develop guys and really coach through some of their errors and use them in certain times. I hope that they hire a coach that's able to do that and is able to develop young, or if they got to get an assistant that can, because at this point, with the constraints you're going to have, they're going to have to be really creative with this roster.
Yeah. So, okay. So that brings us, we've already touched on a little bit. That brings us to the next two guys, the last two guys. Well, we can always talk about Ronde Hollis. I love me some Ronde.
We're good.
But he's not coming back.
Nope.
So Melo and Cantor. So here we go. Now, I know we don't want them both. All right, we don't want them
Yeah,
both. But if you had to choose right now, who would you rather have come back? Now, keep in mind, I know Cantor doesn't play good defense, but you assume you have a healthy Nurk gobbling up minutes at center. Now he just gets to play against backup bigs. It's not great to judge him against Jokic. He played pretty good considering most of the year. So I'm just gonna put that out there. And obviously Melo can still score, kind of. But he's kind of built a little bit of a small legacy for a guy who's still going to be a future Hall of Famer. That's really all he has going for him right now in Portland. So I'm kind of curious if you had to bring back one of those guys, same type of contract. I mean, Melo, would take another minimum versus Cantor, who's probably still going to, be in that 5 to 10 mil range as a backup center.
Yeah.
Who we taking?
It's really easy for me. It's Melo. It's spot up threes. It's offense. Unfortunately, we watched Cantor get played out of the playoffs too many times. We watched him play. He's just too limited, I would say, with this team, and it's not his fault. If he was on a different team that had more defense around him, and he could just come in and be a backup energy big, where he just gets rebounds and plays with certain guys. But for me, it's Melo. I don't want either one of them back. But if you're going to tell me that, here's the problem. If we re-sign Melo to the minimum, is he going to definitely get 18 plus minutes per game? That's my problem. If he's going to get a guaranteed role, the only way I want Melo back is if we have to use him or we use him in matchup situations. He can't just get the minutes that Nasir Little should play just because of the legacy.
Yeah.
That's my issue.
Appreciate it. That's a good answer.
What about you?
I mean, no, because Cantor I think will cost too much. I still think he's still such a good rebounder, and he's a decent offensive player to where a team will give him money to come be that backup, just like you said, that backup energy guy. So to me, I would probably rather have Cantor. No, because both guys don't give you defense, and if it's going to come down to just purely offense, Melo is probably the better deal. I just feel like both of them can be replaced by energy big.
Yeah, I'm out. Both of them are such a liability on defense.
Michael Greens of the world.
Yeah.
But Melo does shoot pretty well. He shoots pretty well. If you get, if you play him and Little at the same time, and you kind of have more energy from Little to make up for some of Melo's mistakes, and you go out and get a backup big, I can actually play defense. Because Melo really played. I mean, on ball, he wasn't bad. When he was forced to play an actual power forward role in a backup center when we went small, he actually played okay. Like, he's big enough at this point in his career to still handle a lot of the smaller guys, smaller power forwards, and really centers, to where if he's up on him, it's hard to score on him. He actually has good hands. I just think it's the perimeter stuff. And he gets on a smaller guy, he cannot stay with guys. He can't get out to put his hand up in front of 3-point shooters anymore. I mean, he got whooped by Denver's. Jermichael Green made him look silly. Millsap made him look silly at times. And really, those are the kind of guys that he should be able to defend better. But they both hit the three. They drew him out just enough. So,
yeah, I'm with you.
I still like him as a backup four. I would rather get a defensive-minded center and a backup four of Melo. Sure, put Little at the three. Let him kind of play the actual wing role. I'm honestly all for starting Little next year. I know that seems silly. If you bring Jones back, you're probably not doing it anyway. But I mean, if I had to choose between them, I'm bringing Melo back because, again, contract's going to be cheap. He's got the relationship with Neil. Him and Dame are still tight. I mean, we gave him a big role. If you say, hey, we're going to come out and give you a similar role, then maybe you do. Maybe you still need bench scoring. That was a big issue. And if Anthony doesn't get consistent, then you're going to have somebody come in and give you 15 to 18 a night. So
offense is hard to find, man. It's hard to find. And as much as it's a non-traditional role, he can play the sixth-man energy scorer off the bench when Dame and CJ need rest. And that's hard to find. I think that you can replace Cantor easier. The only problem is at times Melo was a ball stopper. At times Melo did too much offensively. He didn't take the spot up threes. So there's positives and negatives to both, but they're minimum players. Like, you have to sign someone. Wouldn't you rather have Melo over Kelvin Blevins or Ronde Hollis Jefferson? Like, you've got to have someone in that money role that's going to play. Like I said, you got to get creative with this offense because we're maxed out with the roster construction the way it is. So it is what it is, man.
No, I agree. So Melo's a guy I would rather have back. I love Cantor. I love the poor guy has been forced into so many tough situations because of the Nurk injuries. I mean, he's had to start. Yes. He wasn't really brought in to start. Both times he's brought in to be the backup. He's like, I'm cool with that. And then he has to start.
Yeah.
And he just can't play defense. I mean, he tries. It's not that he's one of those guys that I respect because he at least hustles. You can tell he gets just pissed when he fails on something. He's running after stuff. He just doesn't have the speed or footwork.
No athleticism.
It's not his game.
No.
But I mean, the putbacks that we got, respect to him, he was the only guy that got any points outside of Dame in the double overtime Denver game. He got the one putback, and that was the only 2 points that anybody scored outside of Dame. So I wish we could afford him. I like him as a backup big. I do, but you got to have a vet bench guys around him. And with Little still being raw and Amp still being raw, neither of them are great defenders. They could be. We don't know. They're athletic enough to really recover, but if you bring back a guy like Melo, then it's just you can't have the lack of defense on the bench. Teams outscored us this year with the bench more often than not, and that's a problem. So, yeah, I'm in agreement with you, and that's what makes it tough. And that's kind of when we start talking about free agents in a couple of weeks, months, whatever it is, we're going to start talking about these kind of guys that you're going to have to bring back, and Melo's going to end up being one of them. Again, Neil's comments to the presser made it sound like probably not going to be a Melo thing. He talked about wanting a defensive bench more so. He said they went in for offense, didn't work. And you know that Cantor is not the offensive juggernaut that he was talking about.
Yeah, I think
he was basically saying that we tried the Melo thing again. We couldn't stop anybody. We're done with the Melo thing. So, I don't think he comes back. I think he gets. I'm good with him. Go get a role on a team like the Lakers. Like I hate to see it, but if you have a chance to be on a true title contender, go try to get your ring. I don't care. At this point in your career, I'm not mad if you leave us to go chase the ring, bro. You're like 37. Go play behind LeBron and play 10 minutes a game and just earn a ring. I don't know, so you can walk out with one. But that's where I'm at with him.
Okay. I think I just want to call out. So for anybody who's listening at this point in the pod, you're probably like, why aren't you guys talking about trades or anything like that? We're going to cover those in another episode, and then we're going to talk about free agents in another episode. So
plenty of content.
The other thing that I wanted to ask you about, and it's very simple. You have to make a choice between two guys, Derek Jones or Zach Collins. So you could have one of them back next year. I think I know which way you'd lean on that, but I was wondering.
You do know exactly which way I'm going to go. Zach Collins. I'm sorry, I'm done with. I don't like Jones. I know we need wings, but we need wings that can score offensively. We need wings that can. He just doesn't do enough. I just the energy. People are going to say, "Oh, he played with energy and effort." No, he didn't. Stop it. If you watch the games, he looked lazy. Now he had moments where he looked engaged. I'm not going to sit here and say he didn't have moments where he looked engaged, but outside of the few splashy dunks and a few good blocks and a couple plays here and there, I'm sorry. I told you. I've said it all year. If you put Hollis Jefferson's energy inside of Jones would be unstoppable. He can't shoot, but I mean, defensively, offensive rebounds, all the things that Ronde consistently does is always around the ball. If Jones did that, I'd want him back in a heartbeat. But he has the athletic ability to do that, and he just doesn't. I don't want him, not for 10 mil. Yeah. If he was 5 mil, I'd take him over Cantor because I agree. I'd be fine with having another defensive wing, but not for 10 mil. That money can go to something else. I don't know. Bench vets, it can go to a better starter at the 4-3. If you don't trade CJ, you're going to need a better. There's other vets out there. I'd rather have that go to like a guy like Crowder. I mean, he may not be available. My point is a player like that who can shoot the three. Those guys are out there. They're gettable. And for Jones's money, nope, bye.
Yeah, and it's hard to watch a team like Phoenix right now because they drafted Mikal Bridges, developed him into a really good wing. They took on Crowder, who's been amazing. If you look at how many teams he's been on lately that have been in either the conference finals, whichever conference he was in, or in the actual NBA finals, he's been on a lot of those teams. He was on Miami last year. He's on Phoenix this year.
Boston. I mean, he's been with all sorts of people.
It's crazy. And then the other thing is they took on Torrey Craig, who's another person that in the past has given Dame fits in Denver. So, you look at a team like Phoenix, they just got 3 really good wings they drafted one, developed one, brought one in who's an older guy, signed one to a decent contract. So that's what I think that the Blazers need to do. I think they need to confidently surround our 2 guards with wings that can do it all. Now that's not always easy, but we got to get some length. I think that this year is going to be a weird free agency, but we'll cover that later. Anything else or any other questions that you had pop into your brain this week?
No, I mean, That was pretty much it. That's all I really wanted to talk about. I mean, I know that we interviewed D'Antoni today. We're interviewing some other coaches here, Hammond, and I believe Billups is going to be coming up soon. But outside of that, I mean, we're going to get to the coaching discussion. We'll talk about some interviews and get back to kind of our normal thing next week as we talk about news. And that's kind of what we're going to be doing for the rest of the year, is really slightly shorter pods, show episodes, whatever you want to call this at this point. And then we'll kind of touch on some of the news. So that's what we'll do next week. We'll try to work. We have a potential guest that we're going to try to have on that just talk Blazers, have some more free time, start talking about the playoffs in general. But right now, no, I just want to kind of go over the roster, let people know where contracts are, who's free agents, who's, potential things, and talk about who we kind of want back. I mean, there's a lot of debate between you and me, I think, on some guys, and that makes it fun. There's a lot of players, there's fans out there that I think that Jones is going to be this defensive god that he was supposed to be. I don't agree with it. But that's what kind of makes this fun. The contract's going to be interesting. We're going to obviously get more into the potential CJ trade talk as things go on. I think we both agree that CJ needs to go. He's under contract right now. Neil made it sound like he wants him back. Granted, I don't think he can technically say anything or would, because you're not going to come out and say, yeah, we're going to trade CJ. Yep. I mean, that's how he has to operate. But still, right now, you're going to have $73 million invested in 2 6'3" guards who don't play defense. Love Dame. I love CJ, but not together. So this is what we have for a roster. These are some of the guys that we could bring back. It's going to be an interesting offseason, and we're going to keep everybody in the loop with it.
Heck yeah, man. Well, I'm excited. I do think that there's a lot of potential this year, but it's kind of interesting seeing Neil keep the job and keep, rolling along here. Hopefully he hires the right coach, and maybe next time we talk, we will have hired a coach. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. And a quick shout out just before we go. I know we're not doing this segment as regularly now, but the Blazing New Trails ex-players of the week. I'm going to keep these guys in everybody's mind. Same guys last week, Nicholas Batum, and then my boy Pat Connaughton are the 2 remaining Blazers in the playoffs, as far as I know. Pat had 8 points, and Brooklyn's now lost 2 straight to the Bucks. So Pat's still playing big minutes. He played 20 minutes as one of the top bench guys off of Milwaukee's bench. Love me some Pat. I hope that Pat keeps up the success. I'm glad he didn't play baseball, because it's fun to watch him out there. Just see him play for the Bucks every once in a while. I don't know. He's one of those guys that was always likable when he was on the team. And then obviously Batum still grinding. I think they're playing tonight. I'd have to look. I don't remember when the Clippers play the Jazz next, but he's still grinding with a decent role right now with the Clippers. So another guy that you want to consider maybe next year in free agency to bring home at a cheap deal with the way he's playing. So both those guys, quick shout out. As far as I know, they're the only ex-Blazers playing relatively any kind of meaningful minutes on an actual playoff team right now. So, hat off to them. And that's all I got, man. That's about it. Subscribe, follow us on the social medias. And we don't really get involved with Instagram or Facebook anymore like we probably should, but whatever. Twitter, we love to engage with everybody. And obviously on here, we're going to continue to give you guys the updates. I assume if anybody made it this far in the video, then you don't really need to know that we're also on Spotify and all the other podcast sites. But hey, we are. If you have friends or family that prefer to do audio only, check us out. Shout out to my buddy Bryce Roberts. He's continuing to do the video editing for us. We hope to have a better plan throughout the offseason next year to make it a little bit better. But for now, he's been doing an awesome job, everything that we've asked him to do. So shout out to you. And that's it for me, man.
That's it. Everybody just have a great week. We out.
Yep. Rip City out.
Peace.